We are on. So for the audience that doesn't know you, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name is Rick Prado. I am a CIA Senior Operations Officer, retired, former Air Force pararescueman. And I wrote a book about 2 years ago, which became a New York Times bestseller, Black Ops. And doing an interview with you here today.
I'm happy to have you here. So from start, so what is your book about? Let's start with that.
Well, the book is primarily about what the agency, what the CIA really, really does, not what Hollywood portrays, not what the novels portray. We get a very bad rap on screen and on novels. My colleagues being alcoholics, traitors, assassins, and all this other kind of BS. And with the attrition that we have suffered post 9/11 in the agency, many of those scars on the walls are people that I knew personally and or even sent in harm's way. I felt a debt of honor to their children to have something that mom could go to them and say, this is what kind of stuff your dad did during the war. Break away that mystique, that negative mystique of, being a treacherous organization. My colleagues are some of the best men and women that I ever worked with, and to this day we're friends. The other part of the book too, of course, is through the story of my life. I lived in a communist country. I'm a Cuban refugee, legal to the United States in 1962, and for me, being able to highlight the fact that I fought communism in 5 or 6 different incarnations was part of that mission.
So living the life that you've led, I'll just get this straight out of the way. What's the most important thing that you've learned?
I think leadership is probably what I learned and benefited the most from. No organization can be elite unless you have good selection, you have attrition, and you have leadership. And I was blessed with just about every boss I ever had were bigger than life individuals, people that really taught me through example. And I think that I learned that and I mastered that. And I think that was a big part of my success, was learning how to be a leader. And being a leader is more of it's not an intellectual exercise. It is more of a conviction. It is more of really caring for your men and women and for the mission. And I think that this was essential. I think that of all the medals that I received in the agency, the biggest accolades for me were the fact that my peers and my subordinates all would tell you, says, you were, even though you were a senior officer in the agency, you were the first guy picking up brass, you were the first guy through the door, you were the first guy at the gym or the mat. And I never asked them to do anything that they had not seen me do before.
So what does the ideal leader, if you had to sum it up in a few sentences, what is the ideal leader to you?
A man or a woman who believes in the mission and respects the life of their subordinates and leads by example.
So when it comes to the CIA, right, and the training that you got at the CIA, because I've interviewed a lot of different CIA guys and they did a lot of different jobs. Some of them are recruitment guys, some of them are people that are trying to do interrogations. So with you, what is the root of your job exactly? Like, what are you doing on a day-to-day basis?
Well, I started my career at the agency as a paramilitary officer with the Special Activities Division Ground Branch, which is the CIA's elite military force, their version of our special operations forces in the military. And so for the first 10 years, that's what I was home base. The first 3 years I did in the jungles of Nicaragua, training the anti-communist Contras, fighting the Sandinistas. From there, I went in to training, went through the farm, became a case officer, an operations officer. We're not agents, by the way. We're operations officers. And the rest of my career was a mix of paramilitary, case officer, and most of my focus post the Contra programs was counterterrorism. My last job that I can talk about seriously, I was chief of operations at the CIA's counterterrorist center.
So, looking at everything that you gathered and learned from being in the field and being a CIA officer and all these different careers, right, in the CIA, what do you think you like? What did the CIA teach you that you don't think you could have learned in the outside world?
Well, one of the lessons that they inculcate at the farm is how important our assets or agents are to our organization. That is our bread and butter. And learning how to win them over, maintain them, run them decently, and most importantly, protect them. I learned very early on that I was going to be dealing with some mixed individuals, and you had to show them respect, but at the same time, they had to look across the table and understand that you're not a pushover. So there's a balance between being their boss and being their friend. I think that was instrumental in not only me running agents, but also in my leadership qualities, because you feel the same responsibility.
So, when you're talking about getting people on your side and the recruitment and the flipping process of that, when you're doing that as your job, what does that look like, right? Because I've had Jim Lawler on, and and you're smiling because I'm guessing you know who he is. So
he's a dear friend of mine.
Yeah,
Mad dog.
Yeah, he's a good dude. Good dude. But he and I had a very long conversation about persuasion and how he exactly did it and some of the differences between genders. So, what if you had to break it down in your own words? How do you get somebody to flip on their country?
Well, the first, our job when we're overseas is to, mingle, get to know people, using existing assets, get leads to people that may have access to the information that your country needs. We steal, but we steal for all the right reasons. We don't steal for our own pockets. So, the recruitment cycle is something that's very open. I mean, you spot the individual that that you think they'll be of interest. You kind of like meet them, get to know them, start seeing what makes them tick. I found that the best way of recruiting somebody is figuring out what keeps them up at night and offer them a solution, whether it's their family or the political situation in their country. So from that development comes the recruitment, and then formalizing that recruitment through tasking and verification. And you run the agents, and eventually, if your recruitment is really successful, you turn it over to a new agent. I'm sorry, to a new case officer. You turn the agent onto a new case officer when you depart the country.
Do you think that there's anything you would have changed in the agency, like that you saw that you didn't like about their methods that you would personally change if you could, either because it's more effective or because it's more moral, maybe?
Well, it's for me, it's really simple because, like I said, I was a senior officer. I was the equivalent of a 2-star in what is my agency. And if I could change one thing, it would be I would make sure that our agency is run by former CIA officers, not political appointees. We've only had one political appointee, Pompeo, who was extremely good, loved by the agency. He loved the agency. Unfortunately, they moved him over to state. But the majority of the directors that we have at the agency are political appointees. They come down a political side. That does two things. First, your loyalty is to whoever gave you that job. Your loyalty is not to your men and women that are your subordinates. The second thing is you do not appreciate, because you've never been exposed to, what our lifestyle is all about and the sacrifices that our ops officers make in order to get that piece of intelligence that saves lives and works towards the United States. That in itself is guarantee enough for us. So
Do you have any major regrets?
No, I can't say that I do. At least not with the agency in pararescue, which was my first alma mater, and very proud of being a part of such an elite military unit with such great purpose. I just wish I would have stayed there longer. Instead of writing rescue for Miami Metro for 6 years, I should have done my more time on the active duty side rather than just going to the full reserves. But with the agency, no, I think that I had a dream career and I was blessed with really good leaders.
Do you think that if you had to put one or the other, your bets on one or the other, if the CIA was a net, as an organization, is a net positive or a net negative, what would you say?
It's a net positive. I mean, in spite of politics, they still do good work. And the sad thing is, there's times where we are doing work in spite of our leadership, in spite of our administration. There's no lack of talent, and there's definitely no lack of patriotism in the ranks. And we're apolitical. I mean, just like the military, we are apolitical. One thing that a lot of people don't even know, at least when I was in, you could not have a political bumper sticker on your car if you were in the agency. Because if I'm a boss and I'm either conservative or liberal or whatever, and you're the opposite, you feel threatened. So that's very sacrosanct for us. We don't do politics in the agency.
So what I will say, or what I will ask about now is who does who does the CIA ultimately work for, right? Because a lot of people say they work for the president on paper, but there's a lot of times when they will make decisions that where the president isn't present, right? And they'll go, and the CIA director, Bill Burns is his name. Like he's known to talk to various people. He went to, for example, Ukraine. Was it Ukraine? He went to, I think it was to Russia, and he met with Prigozhin like a day before Prigozhin attempted like a coup on Russia, right? So when it comes to the decisions that are made outside of the president, right, and the things that the directors and the administration of the CIA and the CIA at large do outside of the eyes of leadership, right? Since that exists, how does that coexist with the idea that on paper they're supposed to work with the president? Because it feels like they're supposed to work for like a lot of different people.
Well, the ultimate authorities for all our operations, especially our clandestine operations, thus the name Black Ops of my book. Black Ops is when you are doing a mission on behalf of the President of the United States and the U.S. hand has to be hidden. So it's not just on paper. We work for the President of the United States. In sensitive operations, they do get to his signature because under Title 50 authorities, especially for the more kinetic stuff that like we did in Afghanistan post 9/11, which was when I was chief of ops at the center. That was a lethal finding signed by President Bush in my agency on 17 September of 2001. I started some programs very late in my career. They're covered in the book, which I actually briefed Vice President Cheney on the programs, and he blessed them. So we work for the White House. We have guidelines. We have, the community sets priorities, operational directives of how we allocate our money and our resources going after whether it's terrorism or China or Russia. But it is not just an on-paper exercise. It's an actual legal, handle for us to have when we do this. Now, deniability for the president, that's a big deal. And there's a lot of times when the president says, "I didn't know," and that's expected. We're paid to protect him and protect our country.
So moving away from the conspiracy theories, right? And moving forward more into your personal career, right? What do you think the most meaningful experience of your career was?
It was throughout. I think my life started out grooming me for what I was supposed to be. Like I said, I was born in Cuba. I was there when the Castro Revolution took over and confiscated my dad's property and business, small business. I had to flee Cuba without my parents. I ended up in an orphanage in Pueblo, Colorado. From there, a few years later, I think I'd been in the United States 8 or 9 years when I joined the military, in this case, Air Force Pararescue. So throughout my life from day on, I believe that God had a path for me, and He was grooming me to go and end up doing what I did. I believe that my time with the Contras was extremely important, because for me personally, I slept in a jungle hammock for 3 years, Monday through Friday, supporting the Contras in the Nicaraguan border. But for me, that was such reward, because I was helping fight the very same communist monster that destroyed my first country. And also the quality of people that I met in the Contra ranks. These were peasants that all had a story. My wife was beat up. My daughter was raped. My son was conscripted by force, and he was 15 years old. So I think that was, and that launched my career in the agency. That's because I was a unique officer, and for those 3 years, I think that opened up a lot of doors for me. And the rest is just leadership. Going back to having bosses that really knew what they were doing, and they knew how to impart that confidence into guys like me.
So relating the two between your personal experience and part of the criticisms that the CIA has faced in the past, which is, what do you think of the concept of the ends justify the means?
The what? I'm sorry?
The ends justify the means.
The end does justify the means if you have the legal authorities to do so. Do we steal? Absolutely. Do we lie? Absolutely. Do we sometimes, reach out and touch somebody or kidnap somebody? Absolutely. But as long as it's always under the legal limits and the authorities afforded to us, we're good to go. That I have no moral qualms about anything that I've ever done, including, kidnapping 2 Contras that were killing their own people and the locals, and they ended up in front of a firing squad. I have no qualms or I know my lines. I think most of my officer friends and colleagues know our left and right margins. And I don't know of any officer that we have that would really suffer that, because this is what you signed up to do. You are stealing, you are lying, but you're not doing it for your own personal benefit. You're doing it for what your country needs and what you've been directed, again, by higher authorities to do.
Now going into your personal views. So it's always kind of struck me where when you become an extension of the government, whether it be through the CIA or the military, right? I don't know if this is ever something that comes to soldier's head, or a soldier's head or an officer's head or whoever, but do you ever feel sympathy for any of the people that you've had to kidnap, or like anybody like that, or anybody that you've had to do work against, basically?
No, and I will tell you why, because we are very good at doing diligent work. I had a lady when the enhanced interrogation phenomena that was post my agency time, but when all that came to a head, I never had anything to do with that. I had a lady ask me at a party, an older lady said, look, well, so what is about this torture that the CIA did for these people? Don't you feel that, and I said, look, let me give you an example. I said, you have daughters or sons? She said, yeah, I have 2 daughters. I said, imagine if one of your daughters, God forbid, was buried in a shallow grave and she had 3 hours to live. And I had to lead a one individual that knows where she is buried. What would you allow me to do to him to save your daughter? She put her hand on my arm and she said, I will never ask that question again. And I told her, I said, understand, because I said that I had a 50% chance that I knew, that this guy was this. I says, I guarantee you that when we waterboard somebody which is not like in the movies. This is done in a clinical environment, in a gurney with a doctor and all this kind of stuff. That's why it's not as efficient as other people will make it out to be. When we do that, we're in the 90% sure that this individual has information that we need to protect American lives.
Do you think that there's any criticism in the public eye of the CIA that is valid?
Again, I think that the majority of the criticisms that come from Hollywood and people with special interest to undermine us, because let's face it, if you don't think that there's a communist Russian China influence in U.S. politics through covert means, then you need to catch up with your readings. That's a fact. But like I said, everything that you've brought up to now is what you're hearing. I doubt that Jim Lawler told you anything different, or anybody else that dealt with the agency would have a different opinion. And if they did, I would like to talk to them in person.
So do you think that so this is now moving away again from the criticism and the controversies of the CIA, right? And moving back into what you learned. And what do you think, if you had to boil down the essence or the root mission of your life, right, of your own life and your journey through it, right, what is the essence of it? Like, what ultimately did you hope to gain from all of this?
I wanted to pay back this wonderful country for what they did for me and my family, taking me in. It was my debt of honor. I have no regrets of my life. I have no regrets of my purposes. I have never had a regret of any operation. I recruited a terrorist in a Latin American country, ran him for a year, and then he disappeared. Was he compromised and killed? I don't know. Do I feel guilty about it? No, because that guy gave us incredible insight into that organization. And that in turn helped us fight them better and protect our own interests in that particular country.
Do you have any desires for the future? Do you have any desires for the future going forward, like what you want to do in the next 5 years?
Well, I'm 73 years old. I've been doing this stuff for over 50 years between military and pararescue, and subsequently what I was able to do post-agency with Blackwater, and still doing the same thing, just doing it for different, for the special military side of the equation. My goals are to spoil my grandkids, ride my horse, and chase my wife around the house anytime she lets me.
What advice do you have for young people?
I'm sorry?
What advice do you have for young people?
I would say that be aware of what paths are put in front of you, because I do believe that God has a plan for all of us, and you have to be willing to not only follow that path, but pay the price of admission. But if you do, you will have a successful life. You could be a doctor, lawyer, or Indian chief. My sons and daughters were never told to go into the military or anything like that. They were told they needed to serve. And I always told them, I said, you could be a doctor, a cosmetic doctor, doing nothing but boobs and butts in Hollywood and driving a Ferrari. But once a year, you get your butt on an airplane and you go to a third world country and you fix kids with cleft palates or abuse wives that are discard or whatever it is. That's how you contribute. So everybody has a means of contributing. You are contributing by putting out certain word about guys like me and guys like Jim Lawler and several others about what the realities are with the agency. That may be your path. So keeping your eye on what God puts in front of you and having the courage to follow it, that's the best advice. And it's the advice I gave all of my kids.
I think that's a good place to end off. Right there. All right. You have any final words for the audience?
No, I hope you enjoy Black Ops. It's a true story that reads like a novel. I've been told, and it was New York Times bestseller #8 when it first came out. So hope you enjoy Black Ops.
Go read his book. All right. I'm going to stop the recording. We'll talk a little bit after the show.
Cheers.
All right. In 3, 2, 1.